Let's get right into it. Number 1. The solid core. Hallucination. Here is the biggest lie you have been fed since kindergarten. That deep down, beneath the layers of anxiety, awkwardness, and that weird phase you went through in 2014, there is a solid, unchangeable, diamond-hard nugget called the real you. You've been told that life is just an archaeological dig where you brush away the dirt to find this hidden treasure, and that is complete garbage. Psychologically speaking, the concept of a singular, immutable self is a hallucination your brain creates to keep you from having an existential crisis every time you wake up. There is no diamond. There is no nugget. If you actually peel back the layers of the onion, you know what you find? Nothing. Just more onion, and then empty space, and then tears. When people tell you to be yourself, they are assuming that yourself is a finished product sitting on a shelf in your subconscious. But neuroscience suggests that your identity is actually a fluid process, not a solid object. It's a narrative your brain reconstructs in real time, every single second, based on immediate context, blood sugar levels, and who is standing in the room with you. Think about it. The you that exists when you're visiting your grandmother is not the same you that exists when you're trying to impress a date, and it's definitely not the same you that exists when you're alone at 2 a.m. Doom scrolling with a bag of chips balanced on your chest. Which one is the real one? The lie is that one of them is fake. The uncomfortable truth is that they are all performances. You aren't a noun, you're a verb. You are constantly happening, and telling someone to be yourself when they are a constantly shifting collection of biological reactions is like telling water to be ice. It's useless advice because it assumes you have a shape, when in reality, you just fill whatever container you're poured into. Number 2. The mirror neuron trap. Let's dig into the hardware for a second. You like to think you're an independent thinker, a lone wolf, the main character of your own indie movie. But biologically, you are a copy-paste machine. Humans are a herd species wired for mimicry, and your brain is infested with these things called mirror neurons. Their entire job is to watch other people and simulate their emotions and behaviors inside your own head. This means that being yourself is technically impossible because yourself is actually just a remix of everyone you've ever met, loved, hated, or watched on a screen for too long. You mimic your parents' anxieties. You copy your boss's cadence. You adopt the slang of that one YouTuber you watch too much of. You are a walking collage of other people's habits. Sociologist Charles Cooley called this the looking glass self. He argued that we don't even know who we are until we see ourselves reflected in the eyes of others. You don't know you're funny until someone laughs. You don't know you're smart until someone gives you a grade. You are constantly outsourcing your identity to the people around you. So when someone tells you to be yourself, they are ignoring the fact that you are socially constructed. If you were raised by wolves, you wouldn't be worrying about your personal brand or your authentic voice. You'd be worrying about biting the jugular of a deer. The self you are trying so hard to express is just a bundle of societal software updates you downloaded without reading the terms and conditions. The danger of this advice is that it makes you feel guilty for being influenced by others. You feel like a fraud if you change your personality to fit in. But that's not being fake. That's being a primate. That is your survival mechanism working perfectly. Your brain doesn't care about authenticity. It cares about not getting kicked out of the tribe and dying alone in the woods. Be yourself is a modern luxury belief that ignores millions of years of evolutionary coding designed to make you blend in, not stand out. Number 3. Authenticity is just glorified laziness. Here is the darkest part of this advice that nobody talks about. Usually when people say, "I'm just being myself," what they actually mean is, "I am refusing to regulate my emotional impulses or improve my bad habits." Be yourself is often used as a moral shield for mediocrity. It frames your lack of effort as a virtue. If you have a short temper, are terrible at listening, or show up late to everything, telling yourself, "This is just who I am," is the ultimate cop-out. It's a way to avoid the painful work of neuroplasticity. Your brain loves efficiency. It loves patterns. Once you establish a neural pathway, like reacting with sarcasm when you're insecure, or shutting down when things get hard, your brain wants to keep using that pathway because it burns less energy than forging a new one. When you lean into being yourself, you are often just surrendering to your oldest, crustiest neural pathways. You are confusing your personality with your trauma responses and your defense mechanisms. That voice in your head telling you that you're an introvert who hates people might just be unaddressed social anxiety. That belief that you're just a chaotic creative might actually be undiagnosed executive dysfunction. The uncomfortable truth is that being yourself keeps you stuck in the past. It locks you into the person you were yesterday. If you want to actually grow, you have to be willing to betray yourself. You have to be willing to act in ways that feel fake, forced, and unnatural, because that is what growth feels like. It feels like wearing a shirt that's the wrong size until you grow into it. If you strictly followed the advice to be yourself, you would still be pooping in a diaper and crying for milk, because that was your most authentic self at one point. Everything you have learned since then, walking, talking, not eating glue, required you to suppress your natural instincts to become something better. So why stop now? Why did we decide that the version of you that exists right now is the final draft? Spoiler alert, it's not. It's just the current draft, and honestly, it probably needs some editing. Number 4. The consistency myth. Let's talk about the biggest glitch in your social software, the obsession with consistency. You have this weird idea that to be authentic, you have to be the same person in every situation. If you're the funny friend, you feel like a fraud if you're serious. If you're the tough guy, you panic if you feel vulnerable. You police your own behavior to make sure it matches the character sheet you wrote for yourself 5 years ago. But here is the science. Human personality is not a solid rock. It's a gas. It expands and contracts to fit the pressure of the room. In psychology, there's a concept called situationism, which suggests that your environment dictates your behavior far more than your internal personality does. Think about it. You are a completely different biological entity when you are at a funeral versus when you are at a heavy metal concert. Are you faking it at the funeral because you aren't moshing? No. You are responding to environmental cues. Yet, when people say, be yourself, they are asking you to ignore the context and impose a rigid, pre-packaged personality onto a dynamic world. This is why be yourself is terrible advice for anyone trying to navigate a new environment, like a new job or a first date. If your authentic self likes to sit on the couch in underwear eating cereal out of the box, bringing that energy to a job interview isn't brave. It's social suicide. Your brain knows this. That's why you feel awkward. That awkwardness isn't a sign you're being fake. It's your brain frantically recalibrating to a new social hierarchy. We judge other people's actions as their personality. He yelled because he's a jerk. But we judge our own actions by the situation. I yelled because I was stressed. That's the fundamental attribution error. You give yourself a pass, but you demand consistency from everyone else. The truth? Nobody is consistent. We are all just reacting to the temperature of the room. Trying to be the same you everywhere you go is like wearing a parka to the beach because winter is your authentic season. It's not authentic. It's just sweaty and weird. Number 5. The end of history. Illusion. Here is a terrifying question. Do you think you are the same person you were 10 years ago? Hopefully the answer is God, no. You look back at your past self, the haircut, the terrible opinions, the person you dated, and you cringe. You physically recoil. You recognize that past you was an idiot who knew nothing about how the world works. But here's the trap. You think the person you are right now is the final version. Psychologists call this the end of history illusion. Humans are terrible at imagining their own future change. We acknowledge that we used to be different, but we assume that we have now reached the peak of our evolution. We think, sure, I was dumb at 16, but now I'm 25 and I have it all figured out. Spoiler, future. You is going to look back at current you and cringe just as hard. When you tell yourself to be yourself, you are anchoring your identity to a temporary state. You are taking a snapshot of your current ignorance and framing it on the wall as the truth. If you cling too tightly to who you are today, you are actively murdering the person you could become tomorrow. Imagine if a caterpillar refused to build a cocoon because I'm a crawler. That's just who I am. I need to stay true to my legs. It would never fly. It would just die on a leaf. Being yourself is often a defense mechanism against the terrifying uncertainty of change. You say, I'm not a math person, or I'm not the creative type, to avoid the humiliation of being a beginner at something new. You use your identity as a cage to keep out the unknown. So the next time you feel like you're losing yourself because you're changing your mind or your habits, relax. You aren't losing anything except dead weight. You are shedding a skin that doesn't fit anymore. Stop trying to preserve the current you like a museum exhibit. Let that version die so the next one can actually breathe. Number 6. The store-bought soul. Let's get a little capitalist for a second. Have you ever noticed that expressing yourself almost always involves spending money? We live in a culture where identity is a product. We are told that being yourself means curating a specific aesthetic. You buy the leather jacket to be the rebel. You buy the eco-friendly water bottle to be the conscious citizen. You buy the specific phone brand to show you aren't one of those people with green text bubbles. This is what marketers call signaling. You aren't building a self, you are assembling a costume. The lie is that your consumption habits equal your personality. You think you are unique, but you are actually just ticking boxes on a demographic survey. I'm an adventurous spirit, you say, as you book the exact same vacation package to Bali that 3 million other adventurous spirits booked this year. Real identity, the kind that actually matters, isn't about what you show the world. It's about what you do when nobody is watching. It's about your values, your integrity, and how you treat people who can't do anything for you. But that stuff is hard. That stuff requires introspection and discipline. It is much easier to just buy a t-shirt with a witty slogan and call it a personality. The danger of be yourself in a consumer culture is that it tricks you into thinking you can purchase depth. You think, if I just decorate my apartment with these vintage posters, people will know I'm deep and interesting. No, they will know you have a credit card and an internet connection. You have been lied to about the source of your individuality. You think it comes from your choices, but mostly it comes from your wallet. The most uncomfortable truth of all is that if you stripped away everything you bought, your clothes, your gadgets, your decorations, you might not be sure who is left standing there. And that empty space? That's the only part of you that's actually real. Number 7. The main character. Delusion. Let's talk about the egocentric nightmare that fuels this entire concept. The advice, be yourself, assumes a premise that is mathematically false. It assumes that other people are watching you. It assumes that there is an audience. It assumes that if you aren't yourself, someone will notice. It assumes that if you are yourself, the world will applaud. Here is the cold, hard data. Nobody cares. Psychologists call this the spotlight effect. It is a cognitive bias where you drastically overestimate how much other people notice your appearance, your behavior, or your awkward mistakes. You walk into a room thinking you are the star of a movie called My Life, and everyone else is just an extra. You think, oh no, I stuttered during the presentation. Everyone thinks I'm an idiot. The reality? They weren't listening. They were thinking about their lunch. They were worrying about their own stutter. They were wondering if they left the stove on. Your brain is a narcissist. It places you at the center of the universe because that's the only perspective it has ever known. But to the rest of the world, you are a background character. You are an NPC, non-player character, walking around in the background of their movie. This sounds depressing, but it is actually the most liberating truth you will ever hear. The pressure to be yourself comes from the fear of being judged. But if the jury is asleep, the trial doesn't matter. You can be weird, you can be boring, you can be completely inconsistent. The vast majority of people are too consumed by their own insecurities to log yours. So, when you obsess over authenticity, You are solving a problem that doesn't exist. You are curating a museum exhibit that nobody is visiting. You are agonizing over the font choice on a billboard that sits in the middle of a desert. The lie is that your identity is a public performance. The truth is that it's a private experience. Stop performing for an empty theater. Number 8, the find yourself fallacy. Finally, let's dismantle the verb. Be. Be yourself implies that your identity is a destination you have already arrived at. It's passive. It suggests you just need to sit there and exist, and the magic of your personality will shine through like radiation. This is the essentialist view of human nature, and it is a trap. It keeps you passive. It makes you think that if you aren't happy or successful, it's because you aren't being the right thing yet. The antidote: stop trying to find yourself and start trying to construct yourself. You are not a buried treasure waiting to be discovered. You are a construction site. You are a pile of lumber and bricks. If you just sit there and be yourself, you are just a pile of bricks. You have to pick up the hammer. Psychologically, we thrive on competence, not just existence. We feel good when we get better at things. The people you admire, the ones you think are so authentic, didn't get there by looking in a mirror and affirming their own existence. They built themselves. They adopted habits. They learned skills. They forced themselves into uncomfortable situations until they adapted. They weren't being themselves, they were becoming someone else. The most successful people basically hallucinated a version of themselves that didn't exist yet, and then acted like that person until the neurons rewired to match the behavior. It's called self-perception theory. We infer who we are by observing what we do. If you do brave things, your brain eventually decides, I guess I am brave. So, be yourself is useless because it tells you to rely on the data you already have. It limits you to your current factory settings. A better piece of advice? Be useful. Be competent. Be who you intend to become. The lie is that you are born with a purpose. The uncomfortable truth is that you have to invent one, and it's going to take a lot more work than just being. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.